Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. It's Linda Jackson speaking to you from Food Focus, and we're absolutely delighted to be able to host SYSPRO once again on a webinar to chat to you about how you can optimize your food and beverage company during a crisis situation. And today it gives me great pleasure to welcome back Deirdre Fryer. We've done a number of webinars with Deirdre. It's always great to have you. And we've got an additional guest in the audience today, on the panel rather, and that's Ivan Naidu. And Ivan's going to be taking us through a very comprehensive presentation shortly. Pleasure to introduce to you our two distinguished speakers, and as you can see, I have Deirdre Fryer, and she is from SYSPRO Africa. She is the head of solutions for SYSPRO Africa, and every time I introduce her I just say that it's just the coolest title. I love the fact that she's responsible for solutions. She focuses on understanding the needs and the trends of SYSPRO customers and the industries that they operate in. She's been in software licensing, support, ERP systems in all her career. She's also done a lot of training because she was responsible for SYSPRO Academy. And she understands that business is constantly changing, which is why she's likes to be informed on trends and engaging with customers to keep up to date with their changing needs. She likes reading a book, although I'm sure Deirdre has been too busy during COVID because there's been so much crisis management. And she has two daughters and she loves to go on adventures with them. Joining Deirdre today, hi Deirdre, so good to see you. It's always wonderful to have you on our webinar. Joining Deirdre today is Ivan Naidu. And Ivan is a CA by profession. He has 25 years of experience in the manufacturing sector. He's held senior positions in both local and internationally owned businesses. And he's got a good understanding of operational as well as intergroup reporting. He knows what it feels like to be at the top of the pile. Yes, Ivan? He's also been directly involved with implementing, managing, and administrating SYSPRO systems. 10 years ago, he decided enough of the corporate life. He was going to start his own corporate. And so he started TSAR Business Solutions. And since then, they've grown into a premium specialized solutions partner of SYSPRO. And he's helped many small, large, and medium enterprises to implement SYSPRO systems across all sectors of the industry, including meat processors, beverage supply chain, paper and plastic manufacturers. And he's the chief solution architect and lead implementer on these projects. Sorry, Deirdre, I think he's got a cooler title than you now. Ivan's going to share his strengths with us today because he helps to identify pain points and then uses software and technology to remedy these symptoms. And he's used this methodology in the food and beverage industry to help companies to strike a balance between being efficient and being effective. So Ivan, it's great to have you with us, and we're really looking forward to some very practical solutions that I'm sure you're going to share with us. And so before we start Ivan's presentation, Deirdre, a couple of words about how COVID-19 has impacted on SYSPRO.
Thanks, Linda, and thanks once again for the invite. Always so great to be on a food focus session and really just share and have this opportunity to have conversations with business around some of the challenges that I think we especially are experiencing this year. 2020, I think for most of us has been an interesting one. For us in the IT space, especially in the business application space, I think, you know, we haven't had downtime. Our clients, and especially our clients in essential services like the food and beverage industry, you know, there was no stopping. So yes, you are right, Linda. Unfortunately, I didn't get that chance or that time to have many book reads yet, but December is around the corner, so hopefully we're going to get there. I think, you know, this year alone, what is really just highlighted for the food and beverage industry, but for many industries actually, is just the need and the importance a business system really plays on supporting the business in this time of crisis. You know, we're seeing a lot of constrained supply chains, the rise of e-commerce platforms, suddenly just new ways that we've got to interact and engage with our supply chain, with our customers, with our consumers, and really just a lot of that businesses looking to IT systems and business applications to help support. How do we help business operationalize? How do we help them put the right controls and measures in place from a digitalization perspective, where we are really now trying to look at our businesses differently and have as little touch points, human touch points actually, as possible. So it really has been a very busy time period for us, and just in this space in general. And so we're very excited to have TSAR Business Solutions chatting with us today. Ivan and the team have worked for many years with clients in the food and beverage space and come with a wealth of knowledge and experience. And I know definitely during the last couple of months have really also had to step in and really help business utilize more of the system and really just gain more value out of their business applications to help accommodate and really try and help go on this journey of utilizing systems to better enable our processes and our supply chains. So I'm not going to take up too much more time. I know Ivan's got lots to share with us this morning, but I do encourage everyone to just add some questions. We're going to be chatting to Ivan afterwards just on some of the conversation pieces he's going to talk to us about now, and really would like to have any questions or engagements at the end as possible. Thanks, Ivan.
Thanks, JJ. Thanks, Linda. So to set the scene, today's economic climate makes the ability to control and forecast essential to any organization's long-term sustainability. It's not a matter of, okay, let's just get out and produce something or decide to make a product and just go out and do it. It is essential that you have to be able to plan and be sustainable in the long term. The COVID pandemic as well has placed enormous constraints on the food and beverage industry. There's a delicate balance between growing revenue and increasing profitability, amidst growing health and environmental risk as well. So, we always say, is there a silver bullet when it comes to food and bev? And how do you survive the COVID pandemic? Unfortunately, there's not. There's no silver bullet. What we need to do is do what we are doing, but do it a whole lot better, and be a lot more consistent in the way we're doing it. Okay, our journey, TSAR, I think Linda touched on it, has been around for 10 years. We've actually grown within this food and beverage space, and to the extent that, we look at, and our motto is live our imagination, not our history. What does it actually mean? Is that we work into many companies, and what we find with management in these companies is that there's a dissatisfaction with their business systems. A lot of them actually start off, this system isn't giving me what I expect it to. Why is that? Is that generally you find managers or business owners are too close to the actual problem to see, say, bring to the table. We allow companies or partner with companies so they can optimize their processes before overlaying technology onto the process. One of the fundamental things that we actually try to explain to the business owner is that if you throw technology onto a poor process, all you do is make the poor process faster. You actually don't improve the poor process. So what are some of the typical things that we do? We automate repetitive process. So by automating repetitive processes, we free up valuable people time, which can be spent more proactively elsewhere. We empower users. It's very important that you actually have buy-in of your actual users. We forget, so managers, owners of businesses forget, it's the people that actually run the system, not the managers. So if you have buy-in from your user, the decision points actually get moved down to their level. Yes, you can automate those decision points, you can simplify the decision points, but you bring it down to that level and you make them part of the process. By doing that, we can also remove organizational structures or organizational layers and then reduce unproductive activities. Teams can be reorganized, you can redeploy people, you can multitask individuals with a properly designed business system. All of this then leads to improved efficiency, ensuring that information is actually input once at source. There are two approaches to business. There's a technical approach and then there's a business approach. There's a famous saying by Henry Ford. Said, if you asked him or asked these customers what they wanted, they could have actually answered, "We want a faster horse." Look at where his company is today. With regards to our approach, there are two approaches to implementing any system. There's a technical approach, and then there's a business approach. With the technical approach, you have the implementation approach is slam the system in, get it done fast. The business approach is implement quickly, but take the time to get it right. Okay. This is more where we find ourselves. So software configuration checklists versus end-to-end business process workflows are very different. Okay. Anyone can actually go in with a checklist and say, I need to do this, and I need to do these tasks in this order, and then it's done. What happens is that you have a business owner that's sitting with a system, yes, can do all of those things, but his process is completely different. So what we do is we actually look at the processes and marry those processes to the technology itself. Okay, designing the system, define technical requirements versus design business process requirements. And the similar methodologies processes followed through all of these levels. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but you understand the process that we actually use. The thing to remember about ERP consultant system integrators is that they are focused on software functionality, not your business. So most of their perspective focuses on defining what they need to do in order to configure the system appropriately. I mean, how often do you actually get business owners saying, that's not what I do, but I've actually changed the way I work because the system has its constraints. So we look at it differently, as mentioned, is that we look at the business constraints, we design processes around those constraints, and then we design the system to actually facilitate or to improve or remove those constraints. While it is certainly important to successful implementation that you have those checklists, it's not, in the end of the day, it's not what is successful implementations are about. Our approach, technology is a key enabler to a successful business. However, managing people during the project is a vital success factor. So it is mandatory to understand an organizational structure and extract the customer's needs and weigh them according to the business IT strategy. Just a background on the industries that we work on. These are some of the logos that we work on, have done work with, and on our customers, as well as our target industries. So as you can see, it's quite vast. We work on most industries, but what we found is food and beverage is our sweet spot. That's what we actually excel in. You'll find that we actually have Distel as a logo on our list. So we've done the tier 2 implementation rollout for Distel into Africa, and the journey with them is very similar to what I just mentioned. They wanted an implementation system for their tier 2s, but the problem was that every one of their tier 2s actually worked differently. Their processes were different, hence their results reporting was different. So we were tasked to actually then to modify and standardize those processes across the tier 2s so that they can use as a blueprint for all future manufacturing purchases, installations, etc. So they've been through that journey. We've been through the journey with them initially for the standard SYSPRO implementation with optimized processes. We're currently busy with the automation process where we integrate and feed information back into their reporting structures into SAP. And our third level on in the journey with them, which we've just begun, is the optimization level, where we are now giving them a platform in which they can measure, corporate performance measure the KPIs using profits. So what we do there is that we've allowing them to actually capture their targets and then use the actuals in SYSPRO to performance measure themselves against those targets. Okay, these are just the countries that we operate in. So we are operating in all of these countries, and we've actually done food and bev in a lot of those countries as well. Okay, just to give you, just to set the scene, the food and beverage landscape in South Africa. The food and beverage industry in South Africa, interesting enough, exceeds 500 billion rand. It constitutes 26% of the manufacturing output of South Africa. And if you compare this back to 2018, this market was 390 billion. There's still 26% of manufacturing output, but it was 390 billion. That's a year-on-year growth of at least 14%, and that is massive. So what's happened in the past year? Okay, so the manufacturing output, the quarter ended September 2020, grew by 14.3% on quarter one. Wow, that sounds like big. But remember that you're coming off a base that's very low. The first quarter of this year, and it's a fiscal quarter, so it starts in April, was very low. So if you remember that it was the height of COVID lockdown. So the base was low, but that's encouraging. It's encouraging that we actually increased by 14.3%. South Africa's manufacturing production slipped 11.1% year on year in August, but only 2.6% in September. Production rebounded in September by 4.2% versus minus 6% for August. So all of these stats actually tell us that it actually bodes well for our recovery from COVID. But what happens when we are forced into another lockdown? Is your business geared to actually cope with another lockdown? Here's another interesting stat. The McKinsey Consumer Plus survey carried out in the end of March this year found that 80% of respondents were looking to decrease spending across all retail categories. And more than 70% are looking to cut back on transport and travel-related costs. So all of you guys that are actually in food and bev, supplying into the hospitality and transport industries, what are you doing? What is the paradigm shift going to be in your business to actually cater for the drop? Because it is coming. So my presentation today is going to cover 5 topics. And these 5 topics are actually according to Global Insight. It is consumer buying power, operations management, environmental factors, regulatory management, and e-commerce. These are the pillars that food and beverage needs to consider to survive COVID and to improve and to excel within COVID. We all want to thrive. Everybody goes into business to make money. So we need to gear our businesses in order to do that. Excuse me. Consumer buying power, the first pillar. First pillar within the consumer buying power is brand consistency. So how do we ensure brand consistency in terms of using a system? So what is your brand? How do you define your brand? Whenever you talk about brand, the first thing that comes to mind is marketing. Yes, that's correct. Marketing is a major part of it. But how do we tie it back into your systems? A lot of time there's a break between the marketing department and your business systems, because generally the guys see the business systems as being an accounting package, a financial package. But a business system is a lot more than that. Your recipe for the products you manufacture are sitting in your business system. That bill of material is your brand. The change control on those bills of material is very important during COVID. Manufacturers what we found is that in the past couple of months, those manufacturers that couldn't adapt because of COVID and because of the lack of raw material, there's huge shortages of raw material in the market at the moment. We've got customers that come to us and say, do you have customers that sell this particular product? What they've actually told us is that their buying strategies and their supply chain management is actually quite poor because they didn't have any backup. Your business systems need to be able to give you that backup. You need to be able to know if I am short of a material, where do I go? Where do I source it? Now, do I now need to go out to the market and try and look for suppliers, or should I have them on file already? Systems need to be able to have alternate pools of materials. So, and we have that. We've got lots of customers that actually, on the top of my head, a toilet paper manufacturer, they have alternate bills because they know that paper is a problem. So similarly, the guys that manufacture hand sanitizers had to go out and market and had to find alternate suppliers of alcohol. What that actually results in is multiple bills of materials, and believe me, it became a mission to actually then change recipes because that changed the actual product. But they ended up having to do that during COVID rather than doing it before COVID. Being proactive is very important when it comes to these things. So what does brand consistency and business systems do for us? So how does this business system actually assist us? So we have a standard, we have a recipe sitting within our system. How do we ensure brand consistency? We make sure that the actuals against these standards are measured and measured regularly. We need to monitor trends of changes in recipes. So if somebody goes and adds 2% more of a certain raw material, what does it actually do to our product? There has to be consistent measurement of actuals against standards. There's no point in having a standard if there's no feedback mechanism to tell me, hey, hang on, this recipe is now changed slightly because my guys on the floor didn't have this raw material and they've added something else. It is, in essence, the same thing, but it's changed the taste profile of my product. What does it actually do in the marketplace? I mean, practical example, my wife comes to me every now and then and says, did you notice that product tastes different? But that's first-hand experience. We don't know why that product tastes different, what changed. It's important that you have those feedback mechanisms. Social media monitoring, how many of us actually go out and monitor social media to say, listen, how is a change in an ingredient impacting me or impacted my product? What is the feedback from the market? How easy is it then to collate this information, interpret it, and then implement changes to the standards? You know, those are all the kind of things that your business system should be able to assist you with. Are you able to downgrade a product that does not meet your quality standards? So quality control on the floor is very important. Checks and balances on the floor is very important. Being able to put items into quarantine is important. You know, and your business system should be able to do those things for you. It shouldn't, and it should be an enabler rather than an inhibitor to those solutions. A lot of times, guys actually say when you walk into organizations and say, how much of your product actually is second grade? I said, no, it's in that warehouse, it's in the scrap warehouse. We actually need to go and count it to 10. You need to get around that. You need to be able to do that immediately. We did a implementation in a meat manufacturing plant, beautiful area. It was in the Seychelles, but the basic principles of manufacture was in place. How did they handle off-cuts? If I tell you this plant imports all of its raw materials, and their wastage, and you know, we don't talk about scrap. Scrap is reusable. Their wastage from the plant is negligible because they have actually instituted using their byproducts and you know their offcuts, etc. So they actually added a new line of dog food. So everything actually gets used. So it all depends how you actually want to handle your brand. Brand identity as well is important. So you know and I'll talk about it later on as well when it comes to environment, is strategy around how do I manage my waste? How do I manage my recycling? All of that adds to the brand identity and consistency. The rise of veganism. Vegans, vegetarians, and related characters made up 8% of the world population in 2018. 8%. That's a huge number. The number of vegans increased by 600% in the US between 2014 and 2017. Sales of plant-based food in the US went up 8.1% during 2018. 8.1% doesn't sound like a lot. Think of it this way. The sales is now at $3.1 billion. Not exactly a small market. So with the source of COVID being tracked to meat, there's a bigger move worldwide away from meat products. So how are you adapting to this trend, especially the small scale manufacturers? Do you believe that your product range is going to survive post-COVID? Have you even thought about it? Have you asked the question? These things are very important. May not sound like a big deal, but you know, a lot of guys actually now walk into restaurants asking, "Where's your vegetarian menu?" How many of us actually considered that? My wife's vegetarian, so I know I experience it daily. Is that, you know, it's a challenge, and it's getting better. 20 years ago, you probably had one vegetarian dish on most restaurant menus. That's changed. So manufacturing needs to change. Food and beverage industry needs to identify that, needs to accept that, and needs to cater for it. And when it comes to veganism and vegetarians, you will get asked a question, and especially when it comes to labeling of product, a vegetarian product, you'll need to certify that there was no meat product or meat derivatives in the process of manufacture. How do you identify that? Is your business system able to tell you that? Is your inventory classified in a way that you can extract that information without much effort? So those are the kind of pillars that we need to look at. Those are the kind of questions you need to ask. Have you considered alternate products, alternate vegan products to your regular lines? You know, and here we talk about, does the business system cater for research and development? Are you able to add an estimate or a planning bill within into your business system? You know, or if you want to try out a new product, you want to manufacture a new product, you do it on a piece of paper. A lot of guys do. I know guys that use, and we always say this, is that Excel is probably the widest used ERP in the world. Guys love it because you can change anything on the fly. The problem with that is that if somebody is looking for information, they need to look at an Excel spreadsheet. And I'll speak about transparency later. And the whole move in the food and beverage industry is towards transparency. Legislation is actually hinting at that as well. So you will see that coming up as well. And it's important that you are actually to stay ahead of the curve. How does leave the food and beverage industry? How does technology companies stay ahead of the curve? They have to constantly innovate. And for you to constantly innovate, you've got to be able to adapt your products. You've got to be able to meet the growing requirement for sustainable sourcing. So those are all the kind of things you have to think about. Those are all buzzwords for you. Okay, cheaper imports. Everyone says in South Africa, cheaper imports is a big problem. It is. It is a massive problem. But here's an interesting stat. Over the last 10 years, South Africans are choosing more locally manufactured items than imported. There's a measure of imports over local production. That measure has dropped from 60% to 50% over the last 10 years. So South Africans are actually buying more local product. So what does that mean under COVID? We were less impacted. And I think we found that we were not running out of food. Let's face it, we didn't have a food crisis. There were lots of countries in the world that actually had a food crisis because their food imports were skewed. I mean, the food was skewed towards imports. So they had huge problems. We didn't. we actually had enough food. People were panic buying, and we were being, being told and being warned by government officials that there is no need to. And we found that. I mean, history has proven them correct. There was no need to panic. We had enough food for everyone. So cheaper imports are actually not so much of an issue in the food and beverage side. Healthy choices. Healthy choices is becoming a way of life. The reality we face is that when I walk into a supermarket, and I'm sure you guys actually experience this as well, how often do you stand in aisles and watch people picking up a product and reading the label? Okay, and I'm going to admit this, it annoys me because my wife walks into every aisle and picks every little can up and says, what is the contents of this? But that's the reality. That's that is the environment we find ourselves. That is life now. There was the recently changes in legislation with regards to sugar and sodium content in the food that we eat. Ever wondered why the government actually went down that route? Okay. Yes, we all know the issues with regards to diabetes and cardiovascular related issues. And I'm going to give you some stats before I complete this thought. Is that the IDF's 2019 diabetes atlas shows that 12.7% of adults in South Africa have diabetes, which is a 137% increase on the 2017 figures of 5.4%. 137% increase in 2 years. According to the World Health Organization data, approximately 27.4% of men and 26.1% of women in South Africa have hypertension. That's 53.5% of our population, although they project that this is actually more like 60%. So what does that actually mean? Think about COVID. Think about the people that COVID affects most. It's those with comorbidities. And the biggest comorbidities is diabetes and hypertension. We lose people. We have lost a lot of people in South Africa with comorbidities because of this. Can you imagine this was implemented in law in the past 3 years? Can you imagine if this was implemented 10 years ago? How many people less would we have lost? So these are all being put into the system for a reason. How are we managing it? How are we designing our systems to make sure that we are compliant? Is our recipe actually compliant with law? And is our actuals that we put into our production batches compliant with law? Is it being checked? Is it being monitored? Is the quality control reporting mechanism adequate to see if there are any trends in any direction? Are we able to pick up? Hang on, we could be in trouble here because somebody on shift 1 actually has a firmer hand than somebody on shift 2. Sounds like small things, but it's practical things that you experience on the floor. You'd find a product today has got a little bit extra, product tomorrow has got a little bit less. Those things need to be monitored. Legislation controlling labeling, advertising, food composition, and the enforcement of these regulations contained in the Food, Cosmetics, and Disinfectants Act. How many of us in the food and beverage actually are, intimately familiar with these regulations? How many of us have actually built these regulations into our business systems? How many of us have put in measures and made it part of our corporate performance management and our KPIs? In order to do that, we have to collect that information. We have to actually submit that. Your business systems have to collect that information, and then we have to measure it against these standards. Correct labeling is a major issue in the world around the world at the moment. Business systems should be able to ensure that obsolete labels are not part of the production process. We naturally everyone says, but I can't stop a guy picking a wrong label and putting it on the product. Yes, you can. You can actually go in and stick barcodes on an item, and you can't scan it into production. You can't actually move off that. So you can put controls and checks and balances in place to ensure that this happens. Okay. So, operations management. Operations management. Traceability, always a cornerstone of most systems. So traceability is always a buzzword. The pellet, earth to pellet, as they call it, cradle to grave. Business systems must allow you to trace an item from where you sourced it, to where you used it, to where you sent it. Greater transparency, the recent trends is for greater transparency within the food and beverage industry. Consumers want to know what's in their products. Where did you get it from? How did you source it? Is it sustainable? Is that source sustainable, etc.? So all of these things actually play a role with regards to traceability of the project. Sorry, traceability of the product. Blockchain is becoming very important with the organic food industry. Manufacturers and retailers are collaborating at the moment in order to share details about product origin, quality, nutritional properties, and the presence of any allergens or harmful substances. Blockchain is going to become a way of life. You may not see the term blockchain, but the guy's walking through a store, he's going to get on his phone and he's going to say, okay, give me the full history of this product. And he's going to be able to see it. And that's why transparency with regards to sources, to sourcing of raw materials in your production process is very important. What does this mean in terms of business systems? Are you able to tell at a glance what allergens are in your products? Okay. So systems need to be designed in order to cater for that. And they need to be designed in order to cater for a product recall. You need to be able to identify where a possible allergen was used and where did it go. Why do you need to know where it went? Is because you need to be able to recall this. Some stats out of the US. Last year, there was 1 million kgs of product recall because the product contained an allergen. 1 million kgs. Okay, there are other stats. I think the US last year had the worst year ever when it came to recalls. The #1 product recall last year was chicken strips. It was 5.3 million kilograms of chicken strips were recalled. Can you imagine that happening to one of our local companies? But that was for contamination, but nevertheless. What happens when something goes wrong? What do you have in place as corrective action, as recall, and what do you have in place when those products come back as to how they are treated or are disposed or destroyed? Those are all part of your business systems because you will need to have documentation, you will need to have traceability as to what happened to those products. That is legislation. Systems need to be placed to control the handling of items when they come back. Because health and safety of those handling the product, just look at COVID. Anyone handling anything now is looking at putting gloves on, wearing masks. So it's a similar kind of thing when the products are coming back to you. Perishable management. Okay, most systems these days have batch expiries. They assist with stock rotation. During COVID, people were dumping a whole lot of food because they were shut down or locked down, and a lot of food spoiled. Systems need to be able to assist you with warehouse management, with stock rotation, You know, we need to be able to, and you know, shelf life is determined by your earliest spoiling ingredient. So those are the kind of things that you need to actually bear in mind in the production process as well. Supply chain portal optimization. COVID highlighted how ill-prepared a lot of companies are to deal with overnight loss of key raw materials. For example, I mentioned it before, alcohol for sanitizers. Food and beverage companies or verticals running out of polymer. A lot of polymer in South Africa is actually imported, so they were running out of polymer. Your business systems need to allow you to grow to a market of key materials. Sorry, apologies. Your business system needs to allow you to be able to go to market for key materials. You need a system that's able to allow you to request for quotes, go out and source materials from multiple suppliers. You know, generally people have preferred suppliers on their systems, but these days with the shortage of material, you know, you could spend hours on the telephone for supply A, supply B, supply D, F, etc. Systems need to be able to, and now in the current environment, it's all about speed. The systems need to be able to facilitate that, facilitate you getting this information in a lot quicker. And a request for quote system allows you to do that. Suppliers can then log into that portal, upload whatever the prices they want to, documentation, etc., and that gets submitted directly into your business system. You can then make a decision of who you want to buy it from, and it also, the systems also can allow you to then split that purchase in order to support all your suppliers. You know, just make sure in this day and age, especially with COVID, you know, sharing your purchases amongst multiple suppliers of the same product, same quality, etc., is important. It's important that all businesses get together, band together to ensure the survival of all businesses, because that's the environment that we need going forward. On a lesser note, COVID has had a massive impact on maintenance plans. Can you imagine me running a business and COVID's now hit me? My cash flow is now drained up and dried up. And what do you think is going to suffer first? Planned maintenance is going to suffer first. I'm going to say, just put that on hold, just run the machine. So guys are now tending to sweat the machinery because of COVID. You know, so all of that's going to come in going forward. We need to start planning for that. We need to start planning for what happens when our machines break down. What happens with all of the material, all of the batches we have on those machines. Do you have policies and procedures in place to move those batches onto different lines or similar lines, or are you going to just destroy that? How do you build those costs then into your product? Does that still keep you competitive? So those are the kind of things that you would need to consider as well. Moving on to environmental factors. Okay, environmental factors, fresh water. You know that there are stats out that show that we are going to be out of water by 2040. Okay. If we use the monthly stats, it shows that 3.6 billion people worldwide, which is slightly less than 50% of the global population, will be without water for at least 1 month a year by 2050. That's massive. That is absolutely massive. So what are you doing in terms of recycling? What are you doing in terms of recycling water within your organization? What are you doing in terms of sourcing alternate water, harvesting of rainwater? Those are all of those things, purifying it, using it in the production process. Those are things that are important to consider going forward. Ever wondered where astronauts on the space station get fresh water from? Well, resupply missions carry approximately 400 liters of water, and they consume about 11 liters per day. They're approximately 180 days in space, with maybe 2 resupply missions. You do the math. They recycle the water. I heard something the other day is that a cup of water in space actually costs, or to recycle a cup of water costs $10,000. That's huge. Expensive clean energy, load shedding. You know, the load shedding effect is going to affect all of us. Our products actually got more expensive with the more load shedding we have because of the amount of product we actually throw away. CapEx spending has to increase. We have to find alternate power options, clean energy, solar, all of those things add to the CapEx planning going forward. Single-use plastic ban. That is a major thing at the moment. I'm just checking my time. So that's a major thing at the moment. There is law in place with regards to single-use plastics. For now, they've banned the use of straws. They've banned the use of plastic lollipop sticks. They've banned the use of plastic bags. There's a lot more coming. Single-use plastics within the manufacturing industry is going to be banned as well. What we find in our experience is that consumers have actually been forced to embrace the ban on single-use plastics, but businesses are slow to embrace this call. In South Africa, only 16% of plastic is recycled. The rest ends up in landfills, rivers, and eventually in the ocean. 8 million metric tons of plastic ends up in our ocean. That's South Africa. There's a difference though. 60% of PET bottles in South Africa are recycled. That is a huge number. The reason is that the manufacturers like Coca-Cola, etc., put measures in place in order to facilitate the manufacture. So they created companies that actually did this, but they banded together to do this. So it's things that need to be thought about. How is your business actually monitoring your plastic use? It's going to be law soon that every company has a measure of their carbon footprint. What have you done? What do you have in place that's going to facilitate that? Again, are we going to be sitting and doing it in an Excel spreadsheet when your business system should be able to do that, because it should be able to know in terms of a carbon footprint score on each of your raw material, on each of your supply chain items, etc. Plastic is not going to disappear overnight from the industry because it's still the safe and easier way to pack and store food and beverages. Our business can be a lot more innovative in their recycling and reuse strategy. Take Coca-Cola and the returnable bottle campaign. Ever wondered why that was put in place? A total ban on single-use plastic is a reality. Businesses need to start acting now. Plastic bags are just the beginning. Recycling of polymers and the use of scrap. I touched on this earlier on. The verticals actually started doing this already. A lot of the verticals that supply the food and beverage industry have inline recycling. So they would take the scrap off the line or the flashes of their products, off the molds, and chip it and feed it back into the process. And so it's a continuous process. So their waste factor is actually quite low. Coca-Cola, as an example, again, uses 8% recycled PET in its bottle manufacture. That's quite substantial if you consider the amount of plastic they actually consume. Regulatory management. In terms of local legislation and other measurements, measures aimed at ensuring that food we eat is safe and handled hygienically are probably one of the oldest statutory arrangements to be found in society. Food laws are required to manage and handling production and distribution of food. There's two acts that control this primarily, the Foodstuff, Cosmetics and Disinfectants Act of 1972 and the Food Health Act of 1977, which controls the handling of food. The South African Sugar Association, coming back to legislation and sugar, their revenues dropped by 10% when the legislation went in. And I think it's dropping more now with the beverage guys actually reducing the amount of sugar in all of their products. And it comes back to brand identity and brand consistency. Has any of you actually noticed a change in your favorite cold drink, in the flavor of your favorite cold drink? It has changed. They've actually used a lot less sugar and salt. Improve supply management. With a greater need for alternate suppliers, the ability to track and record interactions with potential suppliers become very important. So, when we design systems, we always say your business system needs to be your single source of truth. And we mean that by saying we also use the other mechanism of knock by the bus syndrome. So if you have your information in silos with different people in the organization, what happens when you lose one of them? Not necessarily pass away, but if they leave you, where do you find all this information? So you need to design your systems that everything is in a single place, and your business system needs to facilitate that. Responsible sourcing needs to be catered for. What is responsible sourcing? Responsible sourcing is where everyone in that chain, in the supply chain, is accountable, both ethically, socially, environmentally, and financially. So it is responsible sourcing. Sustainable sourcing as well is important. Similar kind of factors, but buying from a sustainable source, not that you're buying fish from a farm or from a source that's going to disappear tomorrow because you've overfished it. Those kind of things. Suppliers need to be held to a higher standard, and so do you. So you need to have checklists in place, audits in place, and the business system needs to facilitate that, needs to track that, needs to keep record of all of those things as well. So if you need to audit if at any point in time you are questioned with regards to your suppliers, you can actually do that as well. Lack of trade barriers. The world is a much smaller place than it was 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. So how do you compete in this globalized market? Sourcing is no longer limited to South Africa. You can actually source material from anywhere in the world. Your business system needs to be able to allow you to compute the cost of bringing those items in and compare it to what you actually have and using at the moment. Should. And you would find that most business systems at the moment do. It's just that everyone sees it purely as the financial reporting and historical type reporting systems rather than forward thinking and forward planning systems. You can extract these values from the existing systems if you need to. Compliance to exports. Just jump the slide very quickly. If you're deciding to export your product into other countries, you need to be cognizant of the change in laws. What are the requirements? What are the requirements in regards to labeling? South Africa has actually been fairly late in the adoption of labeling on products. So you would find that the EU countries and the US is actually a lot more advanced when it comes to those things. So if you want to export product into those areas, you would need to then be compliant with those requirements. On the e-commerce side, this is now our future state. So where to from here? What do we find? What happened in the past couple of months when COVID hit us? If you go back to full lockdown, my guess would be that e-commerce grocery platforms will be allowed to continue shopping. The delivery guys will still be allowed to bring you your groceries. Most stats out of the US, according to the Food Marketing Institute, online sales are predicted to take over 20% of total grocery retail by 2022 and reach $100 billion in consumer sales. They expect as much as 70% of US consumers to regularly purchase groceries online. Unfortunately, we measure ourselves against the US because that's where the most data comes out as often as possible. But we tend to follow that trend, although a few years later, we tend to follow those trends. So what are we doing with our systems in order to get there? We are designing with a lot of our businesses at the moment, e-commerce platforms, to enable them to work if a potential further lockdown comes in place. They have to be able to trade. You have to be able to sell your product. The work from home workforce still earned a salary and they still went out shopping, albeit online. So where are you from there? If you have a product that you're willing to sell, you should have an online presence. It does not have to be a massive Amazon or eBay type platform. You can still start small and grow from there. Imagine if the only car you could afford to buy was a Ferrari. How many cars do you think there would be on the roads? There's a car out there for every budget. and for every company. Similarly, for online platforms as well. Customer portals. How accessible are you? Most people immediately think of websites, telephone, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the like when that question is posed. We actually, in terms of the way we design business systems, actually think of customer portals as your interaction with your customer and your customer's interaction with you. How easy are you making it for your customer to send you orders, process those orders, and send them confirmation of those orders? Right now, we can do all of those things electronically without any human intervention. We're doing it for a few of our customers. We actually respond back to their own portal with confirmation numbers, with possible delivery dates. All that does is actually make your whole supply chain a lot faster to your customer. So your customer then doesn't have to guess as to when they're going to be receiving their products. Similarly, a customer requires a POD, just as a side thing, and the finance head comes out, is that customer requires a POD. How many times have you got a short payment and the customer tells you, sorry, I didn't have a POD? You give them a portal, give them access to it, they can fetch their own PODs, fetch their own statements. Farming, IoT, and big data. So what is smart farming? Very simply, the use of sensors and software to track, monitor, automate, and analyze operations. I decided to give you an example. Example would be sensors to monitor moisture content of soil in a field. The software then receives this data, analyzes it, and then compares it to a set standard. If it finds that the moisture content is below optimal, it can turn on the sprinklers for you from that field. Or if you want to, you can just let the farmer know via SMS or notification that he needs to go and irrigate his field. But that's the possibilities. That's what's actually possible. It's not pie in the sky. It's not future state. It's actually happening right now. The uses can be endless. You can use it for feed quality management on livestock. In terms of hormone content in your feed, we had this experience with a chicken farm where it was critical, the hormone content at each stage of their life cycle. All of those things can be monitored. Practical example in South Africa, you can imagine if you have temperature sensors in food delivery vehicles, and you received a warning ahead of time for a potential drop in temperature in a vehicle. The possibilities are infinite. So in closing, where from here? As Simon Sinek says, the primary ingredient for progress is optimism, unwavering belief that someone can be better, drive the human race forward. During this COVID pandemic, the challenges faced by food and beverage owners and managers are immense and complicated. The world we live in has gone into reset mode. Most organizations have to reestablish that why factor. Building your corporate vision based only on ridiculously fierce competition cannot be your differentiator. You require a paradigm shift. In an industry where a single change like COVID is bound to affect the entire supply chain, future-proofing a business by optimizing internal processes and embracing new technologies is vital in achieving your organization goals. The demand for food and beverage will always be present. Businesses that succeed in these times are the ones that are defined and believe in their goals. The winners are the ones that are agile to adapt to newer markets, changing consumer spending and lifestyles, erratic food prices, global appetite, and advanced technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. The mind boggles when you think about all those different options where you can use technology to improve your processes. And in the time that I have been involved in the food industry, it has been amazing to see how technology has indeed become a very much part of the way that we do business. I've got a couple of questions for you, and I'm sure Deidre has also got a couple of questions for you. And audience, if you have any questions, won't you please pop them into the question bar right now so that we can have some discussions around